Out of all the Yu-Gi-Oh decks that were infamous for being terrible at one point or another, I think Meklords have had one of the strangest journeys that doesn't get discussed all too often. For years, they were frequently regarded as a terrible archetype due to being focused purely on combating synchro monsters, which left them with an overall lack of flexibility, and they were hit even harder by the additions of things like Xyz and Lynx. Kinda reminds me of another bad archetype that focused too much on countering one specific thing. Ally of Justice, who, by the way, also appeared in 5Ds alongside the Meklords. With newer support like Infinity Core, Assembly, and of course Triskelion, they aren't as bad as they once were. And they even managed to be a decent rogue option in Duel Links, for whatever that's worth. But just like every teenager in America, I don't care about the real world. I'm here for the anime. Whereas most cards that debut in the anime typically just have their effects buffed or nerfed, the Meklord Emperors were completely overhauled, which was honestly for the better because these things were a mess in the anime. So let's take a look at what I'm talking about with the first Emperor, Weissel. Ew, that's disgusting. Okay, so they're split into 5 pieces, almost like a futuristic Exodia. In fact, the things that they remind me of the most are actually the maximum monsters from Yu-Gi-Oh! 7s, in that they're basically just a bunch of things that you piece together. The centerpiece, attack, carrier, guard, and top complete a full Emperor, and the centerpiece is the only one that actually manages to have Meklord in its name, which is the exact same as the real Emperor it corresponds to. Now I know what you're thinking, 5 monsters, that's a lot to summon. Well, luckily for you, that's where the cores come in. Wise Core, Sky Core, and Grand Core, ladies and gentlemen. If they're destroyed by a card effect, they clear out your monsters and play all 5 pieces of the respective Emperor from your hand, deck, or graveyard. So yeah, that was the origin of the real-life Emperors needing one of your monsters to be destroyed by an effect. This is also why the Meklord users in the shows played a ton of anime-exclusive cards that blew up their own monsters, because the cores didn't have a built-in way to do that, and being destroyed by battle just wouldn't trigger the effects. Anyways, back to Weissel. The centerpiece has 0 attack and defense, but it gains attack equal to any synchro monsters equipped to it, just like the real-world counterpart. However, the real interesting part is that it gains attack equal to all of the Weissel, Skeel, and Grinnell monsters you control. So technically, they could gain power from the army cards, but that never happened in the anime, so we're not going to talk about it. Instead, we'll talk about the intended usage of this ability. The other pieces aren't treated as Meklord cards, but instead they serve to merely power up the centerpiece, as well as offer additional effects of their own. For some reason, Grinnell was the only one where all of the pieces had effects, aside from their self-destruction, which every single Meklord piece has. Don't quote me on this, but I think the reason for that may be due to Weissel and Skeel being summoned much earlier than Grinnell, so I guess with that extra time they just fleshed it out more. Also, this is why the actual Weissel and Skeel have 2500 and 2200 attack and defense respectively, because it's the combined total of all their pieces that had attack. Weissel's pieces are pretty simple. Attack and top don't have effects, and carrier can't be destroyed by your opponent's card effects, which seems kinda pointless because it only works on carrier, rather than the actual Meklord centerpiece itself. Really, the only interesting one is guard, who can switch itself to the attack target. Funnily enough, in the anime, Primo had a trap called Divergence, which allows you to redirect attacks and effects targeted at machine monsters. The one time he used it, he only redirected a destruction effect towards the almighty Weissel carrier. So I guess there's a niche use for that thing after all. But wait, there's more, because certain pieces have upgraded forms. They are levels 3 and 5 and can special summon themselves by tributing the previous piece, although unlike the level 3s, which can be normal summoned, the level 5s can only be summoned via that tribute effect. So the upgrades basically function as giving additional effects as well as a power boost due to their higher stats. Weissel Attack 3 gives piercing damage, simple as that. Weissel Attack 5 is a bit more action-packed, making your Emperor do double damage, allowing piercing damage, and allowing you to negate a trap when it attacks. Weissel Guard 3 maintains the whole target switching effect, except once per turn it can't be destroyed by battle, so at least there's that. Finally, Weissel Top 3 is just the real Weissel's spell negation effect, because no, it actually didn't initially have that in the anime. Let's talk about Skeel. Most of the pieces are pretty much the same story as Weissel. The centerpiece has the same effects, and most of the other pieces don't have effects, although in this case, only one of them does. That being Skillguard, who can negate one attack on a monster. Yay! Skill Attack 3 lets you have the attack of your monster so it can attack directly. You could also just play Opti Camouflage Armor if you're truly that desperate, so I'll let you decide on which one is worth more running. And yes, this is where Skill's real-life effect of attacking directly comes from, with a trade-off being that you have to detach the card equipped to it first for the real card. Skill Attack 5 just allows your Skill to attack directly with no strings attached. Skill Carrier 3 has the same effect as Skillguard, just in case you wanted to negate one more attack. Skill Carrier 5 also has the attack negation, and if your Emperor destroys a monster in battle, then you can do 300 burn. Whoopee! This feels kind of odd, since Skill's entire gimmick at least seemed to be focused on attacking directly, which is presumably why it was supposed to be the smallest and physically weakest of the group. Why are they suddenly now focusing on attacking monsters and burning? That just seems like they didn't know what they were thinking for that card. And just like that, we're on to our last Emperor, Grinnell. He's probably the most complete Emperor of them all, with all of his standard pieces, including the center one, having some sort of effect in addition to the default ones. The life point attack is on the centerpiece, although the real life effect of this was actually nerfed, as the anime version made the attack equal to your life points rather than half of it. Because this effect makes its attack equal to your life points, it means any pieces that are equipped to it just won't adjust its attack. So I guess Grinnell is sort of the most versatile in terms of what pieces you can actually put on it. Grinnell Top lets you once per turn negate one of your opponent's monster effects until the end of the turn. Grinnell Guard is the same as Weissel Guard, which is kind of underwhelming. Grinnell Attack lets you attack again in a row if you destroy a monster in defense position. And finally, Grinnell Carrier allows you to prevent a monster's destruction by battle once per turn. Now onto the upgraded forms. We start with Grinnell Top 5? No, I didn't skip 3, they did. Well, as long as the effect is good, surely it'll make sense, right? Nope. It's pretty arbitrary, as all this card does is let you do the standard synchro absorption effect that the Emperors already have. Here's where it gets interesting, because this card was never actually played with Grinnell, but instead Mechanical, whose anime counterpart was quite different from the real version. It basically allowed you to discard any of these Meklord parts and it would gain their effects until the remainder of the turn. The entire reason for this card's existence was that Aporia had used Mechanical's effect to absorb Red Nova Dragon, and used Mechanical's other effect to send this to the grave so he could do another absorption in one turn. So basically all that explanation to tell you that this thing sucks. Grinnell Guard 3 actually has 2 effects, although only one of them was actually used, as this was yet another card who was merely used with Mechanical rather than being properly summoned. The first effect, and the one that wasn't used, basically allows you to use the monster equipped to the Emperor as a shield, changing the attack to it while still keeping it in the spell and trap zone. The other effect simply allows you to negate an opponent's activated monster effect until the end of the turn, which that alone makes this one of the best Meklord pieces, kind of ahead of its time if you think about it. And just like that, we've already made it to the final piece, which is Grinnell Attack 3. This is another sort of confusing one, so bear with me. If your Emperor destroys a monster, then you can equip it, and during your battle phase, you can use that equipped monster to attack, and it will get piercing damage. This is another decent piece, with it really nailing the offense factor that most of the other attack pieces really didn't go far enough with. While that may be all the actual pieces themselves, they did have some spell and trap support, although, as you may have guessed by now, it's mostly pretty mediocre. Attack Cannon is a trap that can only be activated if your Emperor attacked a monster and it's still on the field. It sends an attack piece to the graveyard to destroy one of your opponent's monsters. Good God, is that situational. And even if you could activate this, you'd better have an attack piece in your hand ready to replace the one that you just ditched. Otherwise, your Emperor is losing most of the offense it had to begin with. Then of course, we have the ever majestic Wise A3, Wise T3, and Sky A3. To summarize these in as little time as possible, They send Weissel Attack, Weissel Top, and Skill Attack respectively to the grave, and special summon their level 3 upgrades to the field. Even if these were real, I feel like these are just the definition of wasting space in your deck that already probably doesn't have much room. That's about everything in terms of support specifically for these cards. Aporia and his forms all played an obscene amount of back row, but the vast majority of it was more suited just for blowing up those cores, and it really wouldn't fit with the overall theme of this video. So, do I think they'll ever make these cards real? And if so, would they be good? No and no. Don't get me wrong, special summoning 5 monsters at once with the cores is pretty good and all, especially for Link and rank 1 plays, but that's a 2-card combo, since you'll need both the core and an effect ready to blow it up. Not impossible, but unlikely. And get real for a second here. No way Konami is releasing something that allows you to fill the field with no restrictions. They would most likely add text to either the cores or the pieces themselves, preventing you from using them as extra deck material. Another massive downside of these guys is that none of them have Meklord in their name, meaning they have zero synergy with actual Meklord support, such as Meklord Assembly, which they probably would have benefited from immensely. Overall, on the off chance these pieces were to be released, I doubt they would have very much of a role in helping Meklords, if at all. This has been Emerald, going forth and not looking back.